Welcome to the Kindle Chronicles, the Friday podcast all about your Kindle. I'm Len Edgerly, and today is April 4th, 2017. I am out at the beach at Ocean Park, Maine, looking at the sun, which has just popped up over the horizon, just past Prout's Neck. It looks like a planet. It's just a round bubble, orange, one little line of clouds across the kind of looks like pictures of Jupiter for some reason, and it's casting light on clouds above it. This is an unusually pretty sunrise, and when we're up here all summer in Maine, I get to be an expert on sunrises because from where I wake up in bed, I can look straight out across the water to the east and decide whether or not it looks like it's going to be unusual enough to take a picture. It definitely was today, and I'll have it up at Instagram.com/Len Edgerly. I am perhaps more aware of the sky and the beauty of creation for this week's episode because my guest, Scott Parazynski, is the only human who has been in space and atop Mount Everest, and he's written a book about it, which I recommend to you as a chronicle of a life well lived, and he's, by my standards, still a young man, just turned 56. I'll walk down to the waves and we'll have a little sound of the surf. It's a day of gentle surf so far this morning. Not really very great for body surfing. The sound of the surf is a lot like the sound of the noise machines that we turn on when we babysit for my grandsons, Jake and Ryan, who are in the next cottage these 2 weeks, and I've never gotten used to that sound. I apparently made it through infancy without listening to that at night, but it works and they sleep well, and that just seems to be the way most infants fall asleep these days. But here's the real thing, the sound of the surf at low tide at Ocean Park. I hadn't had my morning cup of Nespresso yet when I recorded that intro on the beach at dawn. It's actually August, not April 4th today. We do fall into a timeless state here in Maine, but normally I at least know what month it is, especially when my birthday month rolls around. I will be 67 on August 30th. Scott Parazynski turned 56 last week on July 28th. His new book, The Sky Below, A True Story of Summits, Space, and Speed, was released by Amazon Publishing's Little A imprint on August 1st. That was the day after I reached Scott by Skype at his publisher's office in New York City.
My goal with this book is to show people that it's important to have high, lofty dreams, but it's even more important to then have the vision and the resolve to make them come true.
Also this week, I will have more to say about antitrust laws, and we'll take a look at Amazon Jobs Day. For the tech tips, I'm going to tell you about a change coming in how we access Kindle annotations online, and we will try out the new Alexa controls for Fire TV. First up in news is a 4,000-word opinion piece published by The Washington Post a week ago on July 28th, titled, Is Amazon Getting Too Big? It's by Stephen Pearlstein, a business and economics writer at The Post who is also a professor of public affairs at George Mason University. I've read this article twice, and I am impressed at how clearly Professor Pearlstein explains the current state of U.S. antitrust law and how the growth of Amazon and other tech companies raises issues in enforcement of the nation's 100-year-old antitrust laws. Pearlstein highlights and embraces the work of a 28-year-old third-year Yale law student named Lena Khan, who in January wrote a 24,000-word article titled Amazon's Antitrust Paradox that was published in the Yale Law Journal. I've read enough of Khan's piece to be impressed with the scope of her inquiry, but I have encountered flaws in her analysis of the part of Amazon's business that I know the most about, namely ebooks. For example, she blames Amazon's pressure on big publishers for consolidation in that industry. I think there were probably other factors at work as well, but we'll let that go. She further states states that consolidation in book publishing, quote, has cost authors and readers alike, leaving writers with fewer paths to market and readers with a less diverse marketplace. This, of course, misses the rise of ebook self-publishing, which Amazon made possible with Kindle Direct Publishing, and the many new paths now available for indie authors to make a good living while maintaining creative control of their work. Kahn and Pearlstein did not argue for launching an antitrust case against Amazon anytime soon. Pearlstein states in his article, well, he asks, is Amazon so successful? Is it getting so big that it poses a threat to consumers or competition? His answer is, and I quote, by current antitrust standards, certainly not. That's because current standards in antitrust enforcement look at a company's effect on consumer welfare, especially on the effect on consumer prices. Amazon, in its pursuit of becoming Earth's most customer-centric company, of course, places relentless pressure on prices, which helps it to grow market share. Credible U.S. action against Amazon and other tech giants would depend on a return to an earlier view of antitrust enforcement that focuses on bigness itself, not its impact on customers. Kahn argues that emphasis on consumer welfare, quote, fails to capture the architecture of market power in the 21st century marketplace. She believes antitrust enforcement should be broadened to a public interest standard that takes into account, as Pearlstein writes, quote, the impact of dominant firms on workers, communities, and the political process. While disparaging defenders of the current antitrust approach as huffy old guard members resenting the impertinent work of a third-year law student, he does include some of their arguments in his piece. As they see it, he writes, such vague and subjective standards would merely invite political and ideological mischief. Well, speaking of mischief, my reading about antitrust enforcement this week makes me less worried about whether the new administration might launch an antitrust case against Amazon, pretty much for retaliation against the newspaper that Jeff Bezos owns. I think a move that it was that blatantly political might well backfire, generating support for Amazon unrelated to the merits of the case. Even antitrust crusaders like Lena Khan and Professor Pearlstein appear to be aiming their analysis well into the future, as opposed to making a case for any imminent action. He concludes his article by saying, I can't tell you exactly at what point the government should step in to block Amazon from buying another company or curtail some of its business practices. I am, however, fairly confident in saying that it ought to be well before Amazon achieves a 40% market share in books, groceries, clothing, hardware, electronics, and home furnishings. Well, given that the Whole Foods acquisition, for example, would give Amazon just 2% of the $600 billion a year U.S. grocery market, compared with 20% for Walmart, that 40% trigger is probably not just around the corner. He argues that Kahn's analysis is reasonable because it suggests that, quote, if we don't yet have the tools to identify when companies have reached that competitive tipping point, then someone ought to invent them. I'm sure Amazon is taking this question seriously, and sure I'm going to be following it in the coming years. It's a complex topic. It has a lot of impact on innovation and the strength of our society and our economy. And I don't see it so much as a binary thing about is this bad for Amazon or good for Amazon. It's really a larger issue. And of course, Amazon's going to be in the front lines of what happens. They'll be taking care of themselves, and I'll just be interested to follow along on articles like this, which are, well done and well thought out. The other item I want to mention this week is Amazon Jobs Day, which apparently did not result in 50,000 new employees being hired. A company spokesman told the New York Times that Amazon received a record-breaking 20,000 job applicants or applications during the one-day hiring spree. Thousands of job offers were made on August 2nd, the company said, and more will be extended in the next few days. Jobs Day kind of reminded me of Prime Day, and it did succeed in generating a ton of free publicity for Amazon's hiring efforts. I received an email from listener John Sullivan showing how creative the company has been in getting the word out to job seekers. This was a few days before Jobs Day. John wrote, I attended the Ohio State Fair in Columbus on Saturday, and Amazon had a plane towing a banner announcing their hiring fair that day. I believe it had some short info about the hiring location on it, but I am not sure. I mention this because there are several comments on LinkedIn about who applied, retirees, young people, etc., and from other recruiters who marvel at the success of this most recent campaign because they have a hard time getting the word out that they are hiring. Amazon's low-tech airplane banner flew for more than an hour over the fair and the city of Columbus. Maybe skywriting is next. Well, thanks for that, John. Maybe job offers dropped by drones. How's that for an idea? Stay tuned. For the first tech tip, I want to tell you about linking an Alexa device to your Fire TV. You can do this through the Alexa app on your smartphone, and I did a little demo of it downstairs in the living room to show you what it sounds like. Alexa, watch Westworld.
Here's what I found.
Now, what she finds here, there's the Westworld HBO series that I've been watching, and then there's another one, Westworld, looks like an older one, and I can't seem to get her to play the one that's showing up here. Alexa, home. And now we're back at the Fire TV home screen. Alexa, show movies starring Tom Hanks.
Getting Tom Hanks movies from Fire TV.
And right away, up come Forrest Gump, Inferno, Sully. Alexa, watch Saving Private Ryan.
Getting Saving Private Ryan from Fire TV.
So I can do a search for an actor and then Alexa, stop. And that one's coming up on Hulu, which I didn't think I have a subscription for, but it looks like, oh no, they're saying log into Hulu, so it was going to make me go through start my free trial. So this is handy. I think it'd be even handier if I had a Fire Edition TV, but I like being able to not have to even reach for the clicker of the Fire TV. Now that we've got our friend whose name begins with A set up here in the living room, and we may get more handy with it as it goes on. Another tech tip comes from listener Jim Wellman, who noticed that Alexa is starting to be able to do some kind of conversational communication, and he suggested an example, which I'll try here with my Echo Show. Put the volume up a little here. Alexa, is Chuck Yeager still alive?
Yes, as far as I know, Chuck Yeager is alive. He is 94 years old.
Alexa, where was he born?
Chuck Yeager was born in Myra, West Virginia.
So she remembers that we're talking about Chuck Yeager. Each question doesn't have to be kind of autonomous to itself, and so there's sort of the suggestion of a conversational thread. Jim mentioned an app named Hound that has had this ability for some time. I hadn't heard about Hound, so I checked it out in iTunes, and it's pretty cool. It seems to bring the search results up faster than Siri, Google, or Alexa, especially when looking for restaurants. And finally, this is a tech tip I'm going to be doing some more research on. Guven Vidavine passed along news of a change in how we fetch Kindle annotations online. He found the following message when he went to look for his highlights at kindle.amazon.com. For the past few years, Amazon has supported several features on this site and on Goodreads, an Amazon company, that provide the same service, helping readers keep track of their reading and share their thoughts about books with other readers. We're now merging these features and focusing our efforts on creating a great experience for readers on a single service, Goodreads. And the way that you'll get to that is to go to read.amazon.com/notebook. I haven't had a chance to explore some of this. I know part of it involves loading your Amazon books into Goodreads so that you sort of have a database of your books all available. And the presentation of the highlights and the notes seems to be cleaner than it used to be in the old days at kindle.amazon.com. And I'm glad to see that this is an area where improvements are being made. And it's also good news for Goodreads because it brings them kind of into a tighter integration with the whole Kindle ecosystem. About an hour before I spoke with Scott Parazynski, he taped an interview with CBS This Morning with Charlie Rose. So I'm going to start off our introduction to my own conversation with him with that CBS segment.
After a steak and eggs breakfast, 77-year-old John Glenn and the others suited up and went to the pad for final boarding. Of course, so much of the sky-high publicity and history here today is that Senator Glenn is fixing to be the oldest person ever in space, 36 years after his and America's first trip to orbit.
That was CBS News in 1998 as Senator John Glenn flew aboard the Space Shuttle Discovery. At the time Glenn returned to orbit, former NASA astronaut Scott Parazynski was his personal physician. Dr. Parazynski has traveled more than 23 million miles in space over his 17-year career. He's flown 5 missions and conducted 7 spacewalks. He's also the only person to fly in space and reach the summit of Mount Everest. Separate occasions. In his new memoir, he offers an inside look at his life as an astronaut doctor. The book is called The Sky Below, a true story of summits, space, and speed. Dr. Parazynski, welcome to the table.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a real thrill to be here.
So you performed...
I began my interview with Scott asking about the pros and cons of his childhood, which was spent all over the world. He was in schools in Athens and Beirut and Senegal because his father worked for Boeing, working in the space industry as well.
Well, it's such a gift, actually. I'm a glasses 3/4 full kind of person, so I tend to focus on the positive just by nature, but I see it as an extraordinary advantage and gift, being able to meet new people, being comfortable with some uncertainty, being able to look for new opportunity in foreign environments, and so it's opened my eyes to a world of opportunity, and so I feel very fortunate to have seen the world as much as I had. By the time I even graduated from high school, I'd been around the world, and I'd been to the majority of the continents, and realized that life's greatest education comes from outside the classroom. It's who we meet and the opportunities that we take. So I really wanted actually to raise my own children in that same fashion, but when Jenna was diagnosed with autism, it required a much more structured, consistent environment. So that option was out, of course. But I highly recommend it for families that can do it. The disadvantages are it's quite uncomfortable, actually, when you pick up and move from a very familiar environment. You've got to make new friends. It's walking into class that very first day is really awkward always, and you just never know what's going to happen the very next day. But with time, you get comfortable with that uncertainty. I guess the other downside is that not having a real grounding or roots in one community. So, all of my closest friends, they have hometowns and places that they've grown up in and know inside and out. I have probably a couple dozen places that I would call my homes, but not necessarily a hometown until, as I write in my book, I really became rooted in Houston, Texas. It really struck me in the aftermath of the Katrina response that I really realized what a wonderful community that Houston was, and how I was really a part of that community.
I suppose the other thing, given the unusual point of view you've been able to have from space, is your hometown is Earth in a way. Right.
Yeah, it's such a unique perspective that you have. Growing up, you grow up with the globe in the corner of the classroom, and you see little points that indicate cities and lines that demarcate boundaries. But up there, it's just a confluence. It's this beautiful whole of a planet, and that is home. And it's really amazing how certainly stunning the star fields are, but your eyes are always immediately pulled back to the beauty of planet Earth. And so, yeah, I definitely feel like a citizen of Earth.
There's a great blurb on the book from former astronaut and U.S. Senator John Glenn, who passed away on December 8th of last year. He was 95, and your book comes out tomorrow. So do you have a sense of when he was able to look at your book and write that blurb?
Yeah, I was so fortunate to have, obviously have him in my life and to have him as a crewmate, but he very graciously agreed to read my book, and he read it actually in a slightly earlier embodiment. He read it last summer. I think by that point it might have already been entitled The Sky Below, but he might have actually seen a bit of an earlier version as well called Rare Air. That was the first title that I had for the book. My senior editor at Little A Books came up with the title The Sky Below. And when I heard that, it just became completely clear that needed to be the title of the book. And so I'm not sure if Jon saw it, after it had already been retitled The Sky Below or not, but it was great to have him a part of this book.
Do you have a copy there that you could read that blurb just so that my listeners get a feel for it?
Yeah, it's actually on the back of the book, and I've got 300 copies right here.
Ready to go for tomorrow.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I was so flattered that Jon said about me in the book, Scott Parazynski's drive, curiosity, inventiveness, and great humor shine through the pages of The Sky Below, and will certainly inspire future generations to pursue their dreams with every fiber in their being.
That's poetic.
Yeah.
Now, and then you had a chance to actually be in space with John Glenn. Tell that story.
I shared the cosmos with John Glenn. It was awesome. Yeah. I liken it to, basically, playing soccer with Pele or basketball with Michael Jordan. Being able to do anything with the ultimate great of a discipline. And so for me as an astronaut, getting a chance to fly with John Glenn, it was as good as it gets. And it obviously had some starstruck emotions when he first walked into the office the very first day. There's astronaut Senator John Glenn, and we're kind of quivering in our boots. But he's such a disarming, down-to-earth guy. He just wanted to be one of the crew, payload specialist number 2. Didn't want any special fanfare, and in fact, he insisted we call him John from the very get-go, and really wanted to contribute as a full-fledged crew member. Many payload specialists come on board missions, and their focus is to do their science for their country or for their organization. But John, as a professional astronaut, wanted to help do the filter cleaning and prepare meals for folks. We would do that on rotation, and cycle the fuel cells at before bed. And so he did all these things as a full contributing member of the crew, and so it was really humbling to see his service. I guess one of my favorite memories of John was before the flight. We went out for dinner down in Cocoa Beach, Florida, which is where the Kennedy Space Center is located, out in the community. And of course, he was at the height of his fame. He was about to launch back into space at age 77. And of course, everyone in the restaurant knew who he was. And so everybody in the restaurant wanted their picture taken with him. They wanted his autograph. They wanted him to hold their baby, on and on and on. I don't think the guy had a bite to eat that meal, but after the dinner, he said, if people are willing to wait in line to visit with me, I always make time for it. It's they're the American taxpayer. This is their program, and we've got to share it with them. And so there are just so many wonderful perspectives on life that I derive from John. Being in space, of course, with him was remarkable. To see him actually look out the window for the first time after, 37 years of absence. He had wanted to return to space after his Mercury 7 flight, but President Kennedy kind of nixed that idea. And so I think he'd been daydreaming, for many, many years, getting an opportunity to go back and see planet Earth from space. And so it was really special to be, at his shoulder when he floated up to the flight deck that very first time and saw planet Earth again.
Now, would that have been quite a different view because of the intervening years? And I don't know if the orbit was higher or the windows were bigger. Or
incredible difference. So he was on a very different orbit and a lower orbit on his Mercury Friendship 7 flight. So when he flew with us, we were at a very high altitude. In fact, at the altitudes that the Hubble Space Telescope flies out. And we have these expansive views from the shuttle flight deck windows. So he wasn't strapped into his spacecraft. He was able to float freely and really get a 360-degree view of planet Earth. tried to see if he could detect any global environmental change over those intervening years. I think it was probably tough for him to assess that, but he did take the very first camera up into space, at least the very first American mission to do so. He had to get special approval. He bought a little camera in Cocoa Beach, Florida, before his flight in 1962, and there's a lot of debate at NASA. Should we let the astronaut take a camera up into space? And he'll get distracted, and we don't want to jeopardize the mission. But he was adamant. We're going up into space. We need to document this, and so there are just a few frames that he took of Florida during that very first mission, and they're kind of grainy images, but
probably on an Instamatic or something.
I think it was a Kodak Instamatic. Yeah, really, really basic camera.
Did he take a selfie?
I don't think he did. I think he focused everything out the window. Yeah,
it's before they invented selfies.
That's right.
Well, now I see that you are a member of the Explorers Club, and I think Jeff Bezos, founder of Amazon, is also a member and was honored by the club for retrieving some rocket engines.
The Apollo rocket engines, right.
Have you had a chance to meet him there or elsewhere and talk about his view of space exploration and compare notes?
I am so impressed with all that Jeff is doing, especially with Blue Origin, his space company. Obviously, he's incredibly successful at everything that he's been doing lately. I've met him just once at an event at the Museum of Flight up in Seattle, Washington. So I've not had a lot of face time with him, but I'm hoping that I'll get a chance to spend more time with him. We're going up to Seattle in about a week's time for a couple of events up there, including at the Amazon Fishbowl. So I'm looking forward to speaking with some of the Amazon employees, and maybe even some of the Blue Origin folks as well.
You were a NASA astronaut for 17 years. The way that works, did you have to have the manuscript approved by NASA as part of the publication process?
Oh, interesting question. No. One of the joys of being a retired astronaut, as I can say whatever I please at this point. So when you're actually inside the walls, when there was a new policy statement, for example, we would be given talking points. And it didn't matter what your real opinions were, your new opinions would be the talking points. And I don't think that that's anything exceptional for government employees. Serving at the pleasure of the United States government. And as a representative of the government, you have to get behind your agency. But no. Long story short, my story is my own, and there's no clearance required.
It's an interesting combination of adventures because you've got the mountaineering and the climbing of Everest, plus it says that you're the only person who's actually been in space and climbed Mount Everest. Are there parallels where preparation, mountain climbing helped you handle the challenges of space, or how do those two fit together in your story?
Wonderful observation, Len, and absolutely there are great corollaries between the two. And in fact, obviously the life threat that is involved in both pursuits is very equivalent. In fact, almost identical in terms of the risk of taking a space shuttle flight is almost identical to the risk of making a summit bid on Mount Everest. So to go there with a degree of safety, it takes a lot of training and preparation and a mental attitude that you're going to do place safety and your team above all else, to not get what we call summit fever, or in aviation we called it get there-itis. But there are people, pilots as well as climbers, who focus solely on the objective of getting to the summit or getting to a destination in an airplane, and take undue risk and don't make it back home. And so I think the mindset that I had of placing my team first, being extremely well prepared physically, mentally, technically, understanding the risks that were out there, the weather, the route conditions, and so on, really placed me in a good place. And so on my first attempt on Mount Everest in 2008, I had to make a really tough call. I had severe low back pain, and I could have pressed on, possibly, but I would have certainly put my life at risk and potentially my teammates as well, maybe even placing them in a life or death situation. So I turned around. I did the right thing. And that I think I derived from my space flight preparations. The other corollary that I'd share with you is the sensation of floating out of an airlock hatch to begin a spacewalk in the blackness of night was almost identical to the sense that I had crawling out of the vestibule of my tent at Camp 4 at 26,000 feet above sea level. Had a big down suit on, a backpack on with an oxygen cylinder in my back, a face mask on, helmet lights, big boots, and I was going to be tethering onto a fixed line on the mountain, quite similar to what a spacewalker does when he or she begins a long spacewalk. You have to be connected to your spaceship. So I really thought that I was going off into this other world on summit morning.
You had a chance to look down on Everest from the space station when you were there on May 20th, 2009 at the summit. Did it coincide? Did you have a chance to look up and see the space station go over?
I had this beautiful photograph that I took from my very first space shuttle mission, STS-66, in 1994 over my desk for many, many years. And that was the source of my daydreaming, thinking about, well, what would it look like to actually stand there? And you're right, on May 20th of 2009, I did summit. And it was a beautiful time to be on the summit as well, because it was 4 a.m. local time just before sunrise. And so I was able to see a full sunrise from the top of Mount Everest. The sun started to pop its head up at about 4:05 a.m. And I was looking up. I didn't see any satellites flying overhead from the summit, but I did see the equivalent of an orbital sunrise from the top of the planet, which was really spectacular. One of the really fun things that I did on Mount Everest, I didn't talk about this in the book, but one of my good friends, Mike Barrett, was a physician astronaut on board the International Space Station when I was on Mount Everest, and we did an audio link-up, and I was actually at Camp 2 at the time, and we had to call on a satellite phone to Mission Control Houston, and then they patched me up to the ISS. And I spoke to Mike on his 50th birthday, and I told him, my birthday present to you, Mike, is I'm not going to sing for you, but then I had 3 of my Sherpa buddies sing happy birthday to him in the Sherpa language, which is really, really cool.
Which he thought would be better than hearing it from you in English.
Much better, yeah. He would have hung up on me, I think, if I had tried to sing.
That's cool. I had a listener from Poland who said he was looking forward to hearing from you on the show, and he mentioned that you received the Order of Merit of the Republic of Poland in 2013. Did you get a chance to travel to Poland to get that honor, or what?
Well, first of all, dzień dobry. Thank you very much for the question there. Yes, my wife and I did travel to Poland and had a wonderful experience. I've had an opportunity to visit perhaps 5 or 6 times in my life, and that was the most recent visit in 2013 to receive that wonderful honor and to speak to a lot of student groups. Visited students in secondary schools as well as a university, and really wonderful to be there at the birthplace of my great grandparents.
I thought one poignant aspect that I certainly remembered from reading the book is because of the danger of the space missions, that you and I take it other astronauts would always write contingency I love you letters to your family members,
right, in
the event of a fatal accident. Did you do the same thing on before your Everest expeditions? I
did, actually. Yes, I did. I guess the training crossed over to preparing for an epic mountaineering expedition as well. But I did have a close friend hold a couple of cards for me. Thankfully, they were never needed. They're so painful to write. If you were to leave a void like that, you would want your kids in particular to know how important they were and to give them some words of encouragement. So,
did you save the letters and have a chance to show them to your kids, even though it wasn't, thankfully, in the context of a fatality?
I wish I had, Len. They were, I don't know, maybe I considered them, bad luck. I mean, they certainly conjured up so many awful emotions when you have to write them, and you just hope that they never have to be used. So I think I discarded all of them.
Yeah, I can see why. That would make sense. The other thing, I don't know why this question occurred to me as I read it, but you talk about making a cup of strong Kona coffee on the space station, and I was trying to picture, how do you do that when in zero gravity?
Well, so I'm a huge coffee drinker. And I really like good, strong coffee. And the typical way that we make any kind of drink up in space is we float over to the galley. There are these silver pouches that you insert onto a needle. You dial 8 ounces of hot water. You press a yellow button, and it will then inject the requisite amount of water, and you shake it up a little bit, and you can pop in a straw and drink it. But the problem is the typical coffee that they had on board really tastes like swill. It was really weak, kind of. I guess I would describe it as 1 day old office coffee in the pot, on the heating pad, and so it just didn't really wake you up in the morning. So we could specially request Kona coffee, and the way that I would sort of make a pseudo espresso is I would just inject about 2 or 3 ounces of hot water, so I can make it really concentrated.
The Kindle came out in 2007. Were you making trips to space after ebooks and e-readers were available, and was any of the time reading books that way, or probably more just on your laptop computers?
It's a great question, and quite honestly, I never took books with me up into space. The reason being, I was a shuttle astronaut, and so my days in space were numbered. My longest trip was 17 days. My last flight, just under 17 days. So every free moment that I did have, I'd be looking out the window, oftentimes listening to beautiful music, but I would actually drift off to sleep listening to music on a pretty regular basis. So I think the residents of the International Space Station who spend months at a time up there, they have full libraries of books, and I'd imagine that Kindle books are widely read up there. I really don't know what the current status of the reading technology is, but they really need to get some Kindle in Motion books up there for sure.
That's right. Especially this one. I would think that would be a favorite.
Exactly.
Well, let's finish up. John Glenn was with you on Discovery in 1998, and as you said, he was 77 years old. And if my arithmetic's right, you are going to be 77 in July of 2038. And when you think about that kind of a horizon, do you think there's any chance that you'll be back in space again, maybe going to Mars, or what do you imagine when you hit 77? Well,
my goal is to be every bit as fit and alert and engaged as John at 77 and 95 as he was. He's a role model for so many people. Obviously he was a role model for young kids when he first flew, and as he flew as a senior astronaut, he became a role model for senior citizens as well. But yes, I do see a potential opportunity for me to fly again, perhaps as part of Jeff Bezos' Blue Origin space travel, or Virgin Galactic, or SpaceX. All these wonderful new space companies are going to be opening up the heavens for many, many more people, not only for supporting the International Space Station and going places beyond, but even for space tourism and for science. And so I think there's an outside chance that I'd still get a chance to fly at that age. But it's probably a long shot for me to get a chance to go to Mars. Unless I could bring my whole family, I think that'd be a pretty tough voyage for me to consider at this point.
How long does it take to get to Mars?
Probably about 9 months, one way.
Wow.
And then door to door, 2.5 years away from home.
Well, that's probably a younger unmarried man's game.
That's right. Or what I've suggested when I talk about these things in public forums is I think they ought to send married couples. There are all sorts of science and engineering couples that are even folks that are in the astronaut office now. But send married couples. I think they'd be more productive on a long journey like that. Having overseen healthcare in Antarctica for a time, knowing how difficult those winter over tours are at the South Pole Station, I think it would be the right thing to do for the cruise.
What are your hopes for the book? You've talked about how John Glenn inspired young people, including yourself, to go into space. Do you have a similar hope or aspiration of people having a chance to read your story in this book, particularly younger people? What do you hope they would get out of it?
Well, thanks, Len. That's a really, really important question. And my goal with this book is to show people that it's important to have high, lofty dreams, but it's even more important to then have the vision and the resolve to make them come true, and to not be afraid of failing along the way. And certainly in my career, I've had a few hiccups along the path. I've had some close calls even with my health, but I've not given up. And so anything that's really worth doing, and it's going to be really rewarding to you as an individual, is going to take passion and action over a long period of time. And so my hope is that people can learn from some of my lessons in my path through life, and hopefully not make the same mistakes, but certainly to dream big and then work towards them.
I have been speaking with Scott Parazynski, author of The Sky Below, A True Story of Summits, Space, and Speed. Thanks very much, Scott.
Thanks a lot. Thank you.
That's it for this week. My guest next week will be Jon Fine, a veteran of the book industry who worked at Amazon during a pivotal decade beginning in 2006. For 6 years of that time, he was Director for Author and Publishing Relations. And that put him at the forefront of Kindle Direct Publishing, Amazon Publishing, and other initiatives which went on to change the business. He was kind of the contact person between Amazon and the book industry, which of course put him in the middle of a lot of intriguing tension and evolution of the story that we all know so well at this point. A very articulate guy, and I look forward to having him on the show. He was last on in 2015 when I spoke with him briefly at Book Expo America. The following week for TKC 472 on August 18th, you're going to hear from David Steinberger, co-founder and CEO of ComiXology, the mega digital comics retail site that Amazon acquired 3 years ago. I have been a ComiXology Unlimited subscription member for about the last year. It was started a year ago, and for $5.99 a month, you get a large number of comics that you can read for free. It's been a good way for me because I don't really know that much about comics from my childhood, but I really have enjoyed seeing how great they look on the Fire tablets. The company was founded in 2007, and they began digital content in 2010. David Steinberger came up with the idea for ComiXology while attending business school at NYU. He entered the business plan in a competition, received an award for it, and then got his first backer, and then ended up as part of Amazon. So that's going to be a great story to hear week after next. I am also in the early phases of scheduling an interview with the head of the Amazon Books Store initiative. So we'll find out what's going on with the rollout of bookstores, physical bookstores across the country. And I expect that's going to be sometime in the next several weeks. My cousins next door have headed back to Alaska, Colorado, and elsewhere. We did play some good music on the porch, and I hope you enjoyed that dobro music from the intro and outro last week. The music I usually use on the podcast I've been using for 9 years. It originally came from a PodSafe music site where you could groups were putting music up that you could use without worrying about copyright issues, and then in return you would mention where you could find the the music. I don't think that site's around anymore, but I still love this music, and so I'm glad to let you know that music for my podcast is from an original Thelonius Monk composition named Well You Needn't. This version is Ramonk by Eval Manigat on the Variations in Time, a Jazz Perspective CD by Public Transit Recording. This is Len Edgerly for the Kindle Chronicles from Ocean Park, Maine. I really appreciate your taking the time to listen to my show. Have a great day. Bye.